Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, neye ojira da, medinde ojira po, kwesi radnahem pata akan. Akwamumain amaruka etibimu ojira po. That means greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is Ojira Day, Purification Day. My name is Ojirapo Kwesi Radnehempata Akan, Ojirapo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yerase, we thank you for tuning in once again. We are opening up the chat room, and we're going to place different links to publications that we will be addressing in the chat room. One of them is the Okra Complex, the Soul of Akanfo. That is one of our publications, one of our 16 publications. And the chat room is opening up right quick. If you are on the phone line, if you have a question or a comment, just hit the number 1. For those who are in the chat room, once the chat room opens up, if you have a question or a comment, you have to log in order to ask a question or post your comment. And it's taking a second to open up the chat room, so we're gonna open that up once again, real quick. We'll see if we can open that up, or we might have to reboot real quick. In the meantime, for those who are new to the broadcast, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Joada, which is Monday, Akanfo Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion, where we focus on specific aspects of Akan culture, Akan cosmology, Akan ancestral religion from an authentic perspective. We are actually in the midst of a multi-part series on the Abosom, which is Akan for deities, goddesses and gods, spirit forces that govern creation. Multi-part series on the Abosom, who govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, which govern the Akan 7-day week. So we just did part 7 yesterday on the Abosom Akua, female Abosom that governs Awukuda or Akuada Wednesday. She is called Akua in Akan culture. She's called Nebet Het in ancient Kemet. She's called Agberu, the wife of Eshu in the Yoruba tradition. She is Koni Koni, the wife of Legba in the Vodun tradition. Okay, so it looks like the Blog Talk Radio page is freezing up a little bit, so we're just gonna restart that real quick. So that's what we are in the midst of on the Akanfo Nanasom show. All of the broadcasts, we have 92 broadcasts so far. The total for all of our shows, all of the broadcast archives you can get to on the Blog Talk Radio channel, Ojirapo. You can download all the broadcasts that you may have missed. We also have a few broadcasts that we have created videos for online, posted them up on our YouTube channel, and so you can go directly to the YouTube channel, and some of them, we haven't posted all of them, but we have created videos for some of them, and you can go to our YouTube channel and check those out. If you follow us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, then you can get notified immediately every time we post a new YouTube video. So when you go to our YouTube channel, the Ojirapo channel on YouTube, subscribe to us, and also you can subscribe to us, follow us on Blog Talk. So when you look at the front page of the Blog Talk channel for Ojirapo, you see in the upper left-hand section, you'll see it says follow, and you can do that, follow us, and every time we have a new broadcast or we post new information, announcements, and so forth, you'll be on the list and we send out one email. It's a mass email, and you'll be updated immediately. So you can follow us there as well. So all of the broadcasts you can download directly from the channel. So on Mondays, Joada, we have Akanto Nanason. On Awukuda or Akuada Wednesdays, the show is Egua Marketplace Day. And what we do is we showcase black businesses. We showcase organizations, institutions that are serving the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut community, and also sharing our ancestral values in the process. So we've had a number of individuals come on, talk about their businesses and so forth. Okay, we have to reopen the chat room because it looks like it needs to reconnect. So if those individuals, let's see if we can post some information in there right now. Okay, so we might have to close the chat room and reopen it. Okay, so but we have individuals coming on to the show talking about their products, services, and so forth. Organizations, educational organizations dealing with holistic health, every aspect of ancestral or nation building, nation restoration. We have these various, businesses, services, products, individuals, organizations, institutions showcased on the show. And we also talk about the philosophy rooted in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion, dealing with ancestral culture in relationship to trade and commerce. So this is what we're dealing with on Egua Marketplace every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. So what we have been doing with that show, and just in connection with that, is we released our publication, Offspring, Economic Development Model, and the model is based on starving the beast to feed the pride. So we starve the beast to take funds, reallocate funds away from white businesses and so forth, wasting money on white businesses, take those funds and reallocate them towards Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut businesses, services, products, organizations, and institutions. Our strategy, which we started last week based on our publication, is we are targeting one business per week for the next 52 weeks, targeting one business for a capital infusion. So following that Offspring economic development model, and you can download that model for free, of course, from the website. You can also listen to part 1 and part 2 of the video, which is video versions of the Blog Talk Radio broadcast, Offspring part 1 and Offspring part 2. We did 2 straight weeks on the model, so you can listen to all that information. So what it is we target one business, infuse capital into that business for the week, then the next week we go to the next business. When you go to our home page on our website, you'll see a link to the model. You can download the model. You'll see the 2 videos. You can listen to those 2 videos in detail. Then we also have a list of the businesses, organizations, and institutions, their websites, but then we also have links to when they came on the show and spent 2 hours on the show talking about their business, their product, their service, their organization, institution, and so forth. And you can listen to that as well, but then you can link directly to their business. Okay, so it looks like in the chat room, there's something going on with the chat room. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to reboot that one more time. Every now and then, anybody who's familiar with Blog Talk Radio, every now and then Blog Talk Radio has a problem with the way that they structure their server. And then everybody on Blog Talk, all of the stations, you'll have some, interruptions. And then eventually things, get back on track. So it looks like the chat room is opening up now. So let me just make sure I posted one link. Let me see if we can post the other links. Make sure it's working properly. Okay, so it looks like it's up now. So if you want to get into the chat room now, You can get in. All right. So, and we just posted the link to the Afurakanu page on our website. Afurakanu dealing with hunger, Afurakanu dealing with possession, and this is the economic development model, starving the beast to feed the pride. So what we do is we give that example. If somebody spends like $1 a day on an Arizona iced tea on their way to work or during lunch, grabbing that from a 7-Eleven or something like that, instead of spending that $1 per day, Monday through Friday, at the end of the week, you've given $5 to some Korean or some Arab or some Hindu or some white European or some white Hispanic. You starve that beast, take that $5 away from them, don't give them those funds, and take that $5 and give it to the business of the week. If 1,000 people did that, starved the white beast and reallocated those funds to feed the pride, then the black business owner would receive a $5,000 infusion of capital within the course of a few days, which will allow them to keep their business open, expand their products and services to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut community, hire staff from the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut community to further service our people and so forth. If you're not contributing in that fashion to an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut business, then what you're doing is actually contributing to that kind of economic development to our enemy, the whites and their offspring. So every time you spend $1 with one of the whites and their offspring, you're supporting their business, you're supporting their children, you're supporting their family, you're supporting them being able to purchase homes, cars, send their children to school, and so forth. So instead of supporting our absolute enemies, the whites and their offspring, we need to starve that beast whenever we can and reallocate the funds to our people. So it's not a notion of generating, new sources of revenue or sacrificing. You're taking the same money that you are already spending, making an assessment on a weekly basis to see where you're actually wasting funds with the whites and their offspring, wasting money to support the whites and their offspring, purchasing things that are unnecessary, like a package of Skittles is unnecessary, a package of bag of Doritos is unnecessary. It has no health benefit whatsoever. So when you give the money to the whites and their offspring, you're supporting them and their families and their business. What you're receiving in return is a product that will actually have a deleterious effect on your health. If you pay for a lottery ticket, you're supporting the white business, you're generating funds for the whites and their offspring. What you receive in return is a piece of paper that typically you're going to ball up and throw away because you're not going to win anything. So instead of spending those funds in that fashion, you reallocate those funds, starve that beast, and support Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut businesses. So what we have so far, last week we supported Inkingu Health, owned by Dr. Asivi Adiro. She's a naturopathic doctor, serves our community in great capacity, healing our people, curing our people of various diseases and so forth. So her business was the first business that we addressed on Agua Marketplace Day when we first started the broadcast. She was the first person to come on and talk about her business, and therefore she was the first on the list to be supported in this project. That was last week from February 1st through February 7th. February 8th through the 15th, the 14th, this is our second week. The business of the week is Akongwa Suya Dine, which is the institution of learning, healing, training, employment, and entrepreneurship. You can go to the website, of course, go to the Afurakanu website. All of the businesses are listed. We have 14 that are listed, and we're going to be adding more on a regular basis, so keep checking the site. We're going to have 52. We already have 14, and every week you can see which business is the business of the week, and we also post it on Facebook and so forth. So we'll talk about that again, and if anybody has any questions or comments, just let us know. Throughout the broadcast, you hit the number 1 if you're on the phone line, if you have a question or comment. If you're in the chat room, you must log in order to interact in the chat room. So that's what we're doing on the Agua Marketplace show. And then we also, of course, today is Benada or Apinada, which is Tuesday. This is ODWIRA. ODWIRA means purification. ODWIRA also means a celebration of purification in the Akan language. And of course, for millions of Akan folk, ODWIRA purification is also the name of the celebration of purification, the 7-day New Year celebration, which takes place traditionally around August, September, or October in Ghana amongst many Akan folk. In the Akwamu Nation in North America, Akwamu Mine, Amaruka Etifimu, our ODWIRA celebration, which we call Obrajira, Nananom Som. We have a 7-day New Year celebration. The 7th day is always the first full day of the autumn or Autumnet equinox, the first full day of fall, and that's the 7th day of our New Year celebration. We have a 7-day observance. Obrajira, dealing with our New Year, of course. Our New Year began September 22nd this year. That was our first day of 13,015, which is close to 3 months prior to the beginning of the European pseudo-New Year, which they start at the dead of winter when everything is dead, dark, and infertile. It's unnatural, of course, to start something, a beginning, when everything is dark, dead, cold, and lifeless. But that is their nature, their ill nature. Of course, we don't follow such a foolish calendar. And also, we don't start our years based on a fictional cartoon character who never existed, Jesus. So, of course, we don't say 2015, because if not 2015, nothing happened 2015 years ago. We are in the midst of a 26,000-year cycle, hence the years beginning with 13,000. So Jida means purification, but also a celebration of purification in the Akan language. However, Jida also means purification and a celebration of purification in the language of ancient Kemet. Because, of course, Kemet and Kanat, Nubia, this is the sacred and ancient sanctuary of our people. Akan people migrated from ancient Kanat, ancient title of Nubia, migrated west, reestablished Ghana or Kanat, the Kanat Empire, the Ghana Empire, 2,000 years ago. And then some of us migrated away from the Ghana Empire, migrated south to the regions of Ivory Coast and Ghana, of today's borders, about 1,000 years ago, and reestablished Akana civilization. About 400 years, 500 years later, 600 years later, some of our people were forced from those regions into enslavement during the Musuo Ketsie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era, and we ended up in North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe. So this Kanfo, of course, came from ancient Kanat, Nubia, to the Western Empire, so-called Sudanic Empire, Ghana, then to the Akan civilization in the forest belt and savanna regions, and then some of us into the Western Hemisphere. So, of course, we maintain the same language, we maintain the same culture, we carry the culture in our blood, our kra, nemoja, our soul and blood. Our ancestresses and ancestors, the nanano nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors are connected to us by blood, and they have been with us. The abosom, the forces in nature that were assigned to us pre-incarnation, are still with us and are connected to us by blood wherever we go in the world, because they are assigned to us pre-incarnation, before we even get into a womb. They are assigned to us by Nyamewa and Nyame, the great mother, Nyamewa, the great father, Nyame, the supreme being, who is called Amenet and Amen in ancient Kemet. So, this is what we deal with. Ojira, purification, the purification of Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion. African ancestral religion, or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion, is defined in essence as the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So that means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions every second of every day in harmony with divine order. And through ritual we restore balance to our lives by rejecting, hating, repelling those things, objects, deeds, to reject, to hate, to repel, in order to restore balance to our lives where imbalance has occurred. So the term we use, nanasom, as a general term for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, meaning African ancestral religion. The expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. No matter what expression nanasom takes, whether it's Akanfo nanasom, Akan ancestral religion, or Yoruba nanasom, Yoruba ancestral religion, or Ebe and Fon nanasom, or Ebe and Fon ancestral religion called Vodun, or Bambara nanasom, or Bambara ancestral religion, or Igbo nanasom, Igbo ancestral religion, or Vambo nanasom. Whatever expression our ancestral religions take, in essence, they are all defined as the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. We seek to incorporate those things we need to harmonize with order and restore balance to our lives when imbalance occurs so that we can maintain the integrity of that divine order. The divine order is Nyame wa Nyame Nsheshe, the great mother and great father's order or arrangement, Nsheshe, in ancient Kemet, that will be Amenet, Amen, that shared, which means the divine plan or arrangement of Amen and Amenet, the great father and the great mother. So it's the same concept. And across the board, wherever Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people are in the world, we align with the great mother and the great father, the supreme beings, through the agency of the Abosom, the divinities, and the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. That's the structure of ancestral religion. We have different manifestations of that: ritual songs, ritual dances, ritual prayers, clothing, motifs, sculptures based on our specific culture, ethnic group with regard to Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, based on our migrations, based on our true story, based on our experiences that were unique and peculiar to us. So those outward expressions are different based on circumstance and culture and way of life, moving to different regions, living for different periods of time in different areas and interfacing with creation and so forth. But the fundamental structure is identical across the board and has been for thousands of years and will continue to be, because our culture is rooted in the divine order of creation. There's a replication of that. So just like the divine order of creation is unchanging, inalterable, unalterable, so is the foundation of ancestral religion. So this is the nature of the show, ODWIRA. The name of our broadcast tonight, Bebra, Nesu, Reincarnation and Race, who to accept, who to reject. So we need to understand, number one, when you have culture, it means a way of life, a way of functioning. So in our Akan language, Amambere, Amain means nation, Bere means a way or a manner. So the term for culture, the way of life, is Amain Bere, which means the way or manner Bere of the nation, the Omain of the people. So that's what the culture is. In our cultures, our way of life is a replication of divine order. So we attune to the forces in creation. In our Akan culture, they're called Abosom. In Yoruba, they call it the Orisha. Ebe and Fon, they're called the Vodun. In ancient Kemet, the general title is Ntoru or Ntorotu, often mispronounced Neteru and Netetu, but Ntorotu, we still use those same terms in the Akan language as well for the divinity. So Ntoro means a divinity inherited through the patric line. Ntono is a deity inherited through the matric line in the Akan language. Just like Ntoro, NTR, Ntoro vocalizes Ntoro in ancient Kemet is the male divinity. Ntorot with a T is the female divinity. So these forces of nature, they are the embodiments of divine order and creation. They animate the various aspects of the created universe. The spirits that animate the sun, that animate the earth mother, that animate the oceans, that animate the rivers, that animate the atmosphere, that animate thunder and lightning and so forth, the various stars, planets, the black substance of space, these physical aspects of creation are animated by spiritual forces, just like your physical body is animated by your spirit. The asumsum, or the spirits that animate creation, are the abosom, the orisha, the vodou, and so forth. They are the embodiments of order in creation. Creation is orderly because these forces in creation adhere to the order as established by the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, who we communicate directly with through the agency of our own Kra, Power, our soul, our divine consciousness, the force in nature that dwells in our head region. Through that force, we can attune to the Great Mother and Great Father directly. So when we attune to the force, Great Mother and Great Father, Nyamewa, Nyame, Amenet, Amen, Mawu, and Lisa, and so forth, we tune to them, we begin to order our lives as a replication of the divine order of creation. When you see the order of creation, the order in creation, you see that the forces in nature govern that order. They are the embodiments of order in creation. The great divine body of the Supreme Being, it encompasses all of creation, just like your body encompasses the various organs. The organs are the smaller bodies within your body. The deities are the organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being, and they regulate order in the great divine body, just like your organs regulate order within your body. And then the cells of those organs are the children of those organs. Your heart cells are the children of the heart, and they support heart functions. The liver cells are the children of the liver, and so forth, and support heart functions. We are the cells of the organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. So our parent organ, the abosom, or the orisha vodou that governs our head, we are the cell or the child of that divinity when we support the functions of that divinity, because we're a cell and part of that organ, and we're supporting the great divine body at the same time. When your heart cell serves the heart, functions in harmony with that organ, which is its direct parent, then the heart cell is also serving its greater parent, which is your full physical body. When the liver cell serves its direct parent, that organ that it's directly a part of, and supports liver functions, then it's also serving the greater body, the greater parent, which is you. When we serve our direct parent, because we are cells and children of certain abosom, certain orisha, certain vodou, and so forth, when we align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with the energy and consciousness that govern us as a cell within that great organ, then we're serving the great body, the Great Mother and Great Father at the same time, because they have directed us, fashioned us, and placed us in creation as cells of these specific organs so that we can support those functions. If we would try to go outside of those functions, that's like a cell in your body going outside of its allotted function. Then it begins to malfunction. Then it becomes disfigured. It no longer looks like the other cells. It becomes cancerous. Then it begins to seek to consume and destroy the other cell. And that happens in the physical body, but that also happens within the great divine body. The cancerous cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being are the whites and their offspring. The only people who were ever created are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. We were created millions of years ago, and we've been here for millions of years. A few thousand years ago, some of the cancerous cells within the body of black humanity began to operate in a cancerous fashion. Typically, when individuals start engaging in disorder, operating out of harmony with order, becoming criminals, murderers, rapists, molesters, whatever it is, we typically kill those individuals, eradicate them. Their existence is temporary, and we move on. Some of these individuals a few thousand years ago escaped that sentence, escaped that death sentence, migrating up into northern Eurasia. The only difference is they got caught up in the Ice Age, so they were therefore separate from the rest of the population. So they were able to survive. Instead of being eradicated like normal, they were caught up in the Ice Age, and they were able to survive and proliferate. So when the ice begins to melt about 12,000 years ago, these individuals started to migrate away from northern Eurasia into southern Eurasia, where our people were already populating southern Europe, southern Asia, so-called Near East and so forth, and of course Afuraka, Afuraikai, and also by that time we were already in North, Central, and South America. So the whites and their offspring began to invade and wage war, and they've been waging war ever since for the past 12,000 years, and they will continue like cancerous cells, moving out of one region, Northern Eurasia, seeking to consume and destroy everything in their path until they are eradicated, until they become extinct, until we make them extinct. That is, the whites and their offspring, meaning white Europeans, white Americans, white Arabs, white Hindus, white Asians, white pseudo-Native Americans who are just white Asians who have migrated and invaded North America and Central America and so forth when we were already here. And, of course, they waged war against our people whenever they could once they got over here. So they are not native at all. And we're going to talk about that whole indigenization process and what that really is, because they are not indigenous anywhere. That includes white Asians, that includes pseudo-Native Americans. And, of course, the whites and their offspring, white Western Eurasians, are not indigenous anywhere in the world. Only black people can become indigenized to a land. So we're talking about all non-black people are the whites and their offspring. We call Achiwadye fo. Achiwadye means taboo, that which is divinely restricted. Chi means to hate. Adye means thing, object, deed, or entity. The Achiwadye are things, objects, deeds, or entities that are divinely hated. Chi, by the Supreme Being, by the Abosom, by the Nananom and Samafo. Divinely restricted. So the Achiwadye, taboos, divine restrictions, that which is abominable, divinely prohibited. The Achiwadye fo are those people, fo, who are divinely hated. This is a term that we utilize for the whites and their offspring as a group. So they've been moving across the world attempting to eradicate, consume everything in their path. They've only been successful in reality over the past 150 years or so. Prior to that, they were invading various parts of the continent, centers of civilization, for thousands of years. For the vast majority of that time, they were not successful militarily. They didn't begin to become successful to a certain extent when they began to corrupt different aspects of the ancestral religion and trying to represent or represent these new perversions as real. So, and we get into that trustery when some of our people were already engaged in civil war in our own societies, in our own empires, and the whites and their offspring will come and try to play one side against the other, support one side against the other side, then switch allegiances and support the other side until we wore each other out, and they would try to take control of the situation. This is the only way they were able to gain any control in any part of Afuraitkaitnut, or any ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut civilization. So we go through that information to show we are the first people. The whites and their offspring come as cancerous cells, tumorous cells, malignant cells within the great divine body with a temporal existence. When people begin to engage in disorder, they begin to repel their own Kra. The term Kra in Afurakanu means soul or divine consciousness. The male term is Okra, female term is Okrawa or Okra with two A's. That's Ka and Kaya, the nation Kemet. It is the Ori Inu in the Yoruba tradition, the inner Ori, the inner head. It's the Selido in the Vodun tradition. It is a divinity or force in nature that is assigned to us by the Supreme Being pre-incarnation. When you're a spirit in Asamando, the ancestral realm, and you're about to reincarnate, your Sunsum or your spirit is drawn up to Nyamewa Nyame. They assign you a divinity to dwell in your head region of force and creation, a deity, your own personal abosan, personal orisha, personal voodoo. Encoded within that force is your function that you are to execute in the world. What kind of cell within the great divine body are you to be? Are you shaped and fashioned to be? If you're an immune system cell within the great divine body, you're going to be naturally inclined once you are born into the world towards immune system type function. You'll be naturally inclined towards seeking out disorder and crushing disorder. You'll be naturally drawn towards defense, military-type activities, protection, and you'll end up engaging in some form of occupation or endeavor that reflects that kind of energy. If you have a different kind of function, than a healing function, for example, then you'll be naturally inclined towards those healing functions. So the reason you're inclined in such a fashion is because you've been assigned a force in nature that dwells in the head region. And encoded within that force, that divinity, is the function you came into the world to execute and the manner in which you must execute that function. All that's the unkra and enkrabia, and then you also are given a specific configuration of energy so that you can affect that function and a manner in which you need to utilize that energy. All of that is encoded within your spiritual head, within your kra, within your soul, your divine consciousness. Fourfold division of the kra, as we show in our book, the Okra complex, the soul of Akanfo. It's like you have a cerebral cortex in the brain, right and left hemisphere, and the cerebellum with the right and left hemisphere. The brain is the physical seat of the kra. That's the physical seat. The kra is like the spirit's brain. It takes up a residence. That is the throne. That is the seat. That is the shrine within your head for the abosom, for that personal abosom. And there are fourfold division that you find in the brain. You'll find spiritually in that divine force. You have the unkra and enkrabia, which is like the two hemispheres of the cerebral cortex. Your function that you are to execute, the unkra, and the manner in which you must execute that function, enkrabia, the male and female aspects of your divine function. Then you have the she and shebia, the power you have been given to execute that function and the manner in which you must utilize that power, expanded and contracted in a harmonious fashion without creating disorder in the process. So you're given a function to execute in creation by the Supreme Being, but you're also given a configuration of energy necessary to execute that function and the knowledge of how to utilize that energy in a harmonious fashion. If you attempt to utilize that energy out of harmony with divine order, then the abosom that govern that energy will pull back, retract, and you will have no access to them. The abosom, the forces in nature, the orisha, the vodou, will not participate and lend their energy to you if you're engaged in disorder. They immediately retract that energy. And the only energy you are operating off of then is residual electromagnetic projection. No different than heat from the sun. Somebody can go outside and have direct sunlight, and the sunlight is shining directly on them. Their skin gets dark or brown. They get energized. They photosynthesize the sunlight with their abatum, with their melanin. It transforms sunlight into vitamin D and other minerals, stimulate the body, and so forth. They get stimulated by it, and of course they feel some heat. If you went into a dark shed and closed the doors and it was totally dark, but the sun is still shining, you will feel heat inside of the shed, but you will not be receiving direct sunlight, the direct power from the sun. So your body will not be stimulated, your melanin will not be stimulated, you will not be generating, creating vitamin D in your skin and so forth. You won't be strengthening your eyes and so forth. In fact, if you stay in the darkness for long periods of time, day after day after day after day, not only will you not be receiving that nourishing energy from the sun, but you will actually notice a deterioration in your sight, a deterioration in your body, because you're not receiving that direct sunlight. However, you do get some heat. You will feel some heat. You will feel some residual energy of the sun hitting the shed and the shed becoming warm and then the heat developing from within. That residual energy is not direct sunlight. And the same is true with the forces in nature. When you have the abosom dwelling in your head region, the kra, or krawa, the ori-inu, the selido, the chi as they call it in Igbo, that force in nature you can communicate with, you invoke, you communicate with your kra. That is force in nature that leads your functioning in creation. You seek to align your thoughts, intentions, and actions with the pull in your head. At some point, as you continue to work with that force in nature, it will no longer just be a pull in your head towards right conduct and proper actions, but you will be able to communicate with that force in nature just like you communicate with other forces in nature who possess who show themselves so people can see them directly and so forth. You can communicate with that force of nature and learn how to measure your thoughts, intentions, and actions every moment of every day with divine order. If you get off track, how to restore balance to your life when imbalance has manifested. So it is through the agency of that central divinity dwelling in the head region that you align with Inyame Wa Inyame, the Supreme Being, and therefore divine order. If you engage in disorder, not only do the Abosom, the forces in nature, just in general, they do not participate in that, but that force in nature that dwells in your head region will not participate either. And if you persist in disorder, you will become repulsive to that divinity that dwells in the head region, and that divinity will remove itself. So in our Khan culture, we would say, Nekra Driane, his Kra has fled from him. That deity will separate from your head. The Ori can separate from the head of the person, separate from the body of the person. The Se-Lido in Vodun will separate from the person. When somebody's Se or the Kra or the Ori is separated from the person is full of disorder, full of anxiety, manifesting disorder, manifesting disconnected or discordant behavior, thoughts, intentions, and actions. There are different things that can take place when the Kra separates. If it separates and totally separates, then the person, number one, can either die because the Kra is totally separated, or if the Kra is separated but has not returned to Inyame Wa Inyame, the person can manifest disorder, mental instability, all kinds of mental instability, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, various forms of anxiety. Individuals will be diagnosed with different kinds of, mental health diseases and so forth. Sometimes they'll be forced on medication, all kinds of things. But the key is there's a disalignment from the Kra. There are ritual practices that we engage in to ask the Kra to return and reinstall itself in the head region. Ask the Se-Lido to reinstall itself in the head region. Ask the Ori Inu to reinstall itself in the head region. So, but if it persists in that fashion, it's totally separate. Either the person dies, number one. Number two, they can manifest disordered behavior, manifest mental illness, various forms of mental illness, various grades of mental illness. The third piece is when it's totally separate, totally detached, then the person will manifest what they will call in Western parlance antisocial, behavior, extreme antisocial behavior, antisocial disorder, these kinds of things. Just clear, corrupt, perverse behavior. They have no regard for order whatsoever. The kind of criminal type behavior that they engage in on a consistent basis, they rationalize their criminal type behavior, disorder behavior, because they have no longer an anchor in divine order. That force in nature that will ground them in divine order has separated. If you engage in disorder and you repel your Kra, it's no different than, as we always say, the two magnets on the table that are the opposites are facing, they jump together. If the magnets are reversed and the two like poles are facing one another, they will repel naturally. When you reverse your polarity and you engage in disorder, then you make yourself repulsive to your own Kra, and your Kra will separate from your head region. And if you persist in disorder, the Kra will return to Inyame Wa Inyame. That force in nature that used to dwell in your head region will leave you, return to Inyame Wa Inyame, because it is a divinity, and will become dissolved back into the great Ka and Kayat, the great soul of the Supreme Being, just like a drop of water returning to the ocean, and that Kra has left you and is gone. Now you are a spirit without a Kra. You're a spirit without an anchor in divine order. You're like a chicken with its head cut off, running amok. You are a spirit of disorder now. That is the nature of the whites and their offspring. That is the distinction between non-black people and black people. We have a Kra. they do not have a crop. Because of their behavior that they engaged in consistently, they repelled their own crop. This is why they were forced out of Afuraitkai, out of our communities in the first place. They escaped that death sentence. Just like if a child molester or a murderer or a rapist commits these acts, the community typically will find them and kill them. And that is divine justice. That is part of divine order. We've had that as part of our society, governing us as part of our legal structure for thousands of years. Some of those individuals escape that death sentence. They exile themselves. They run away. They escape into the wilderness, escape away from the subtle society. Some of them continue to engage in that disorder. They'll die in that disorder. Some of their children, however, or grandchildren will say, well, we don't know what you did, but we're not going to continue to be separate from the larger society. We're going back, and they will come back. So the others will be isolated. For those individuals, they're isolated. They were drawn up into northern Eurasia, and during the last ice age, because of incest, they created a greater incidence of albinism. Because of incest and their perversity and dissexuality and so forth, they create the immune deficiency, the autoimmune disease manifests as vitiligo, where your pigmentation is stripped. All those things come into play when you talk about the loss of pigmentation. But the key difference is, it was a spiritual degeneration that manifested first. Engaging in perverse behavior, you repel your crop. Now you are a spirit of disorder. That lack of the Akra, the repulsion of the Akra, prefigured repulsion or loss of melanin, abatum, later on. But the key is, they have no Kra, and we do. So Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, we are born with a Kra. The whites and their offspring, they have no Kra. They are the descendants of those and keep reincarnating as those who, because of their perverse behavior, their Kra was repelled, returned to Inyamewa Inyame, and dissolved back into Inyamewa Inyame. These individuals today, whether they're white, Asian, Hindu, Arab, white, Hispanic, pseudo-Native American, and so forth, they are spirits without souls. They are Sun without Akra. They are spirits of disorder. This is the difference between us. So when we talk about Su, and we say Bebra ne Su, reincarnation and race, or character, or disposition, or quality, or kind, this is the difference between us. Now, some of these individuals, of course, thousands of years ago and even up until now, during Musuo Kesi, during the Great Perversity, the enslavement era, will pollute our blood circle through rape, miscegenation, forced miscegenation. And they pollute the blood circle by raping our people during enslavement and then after enslavement. And even when people try to say that, well, some of the miscegenation didn't occur because of rape, it was just two people coming together. It's always rape when if it's not an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person, it is always the manifestation of rape. There's no such thing as an interracial coupling between a person, black male or black female, and a non-black male or non-black female when rape or forced miscegenation is not part of the process. When we are in our right minds, right spirits, when we align with our Kra, that fourth in creation, that divinity, that embodiment of divine order that dwells in our head region, we will never copulate with a spirit of disorder, with a perverse spirit of disorder. We are naturally repelled by them. They are naturally repulsive to us. Just like the magnet with the two polarities, same polarities facing, they are repulsive because they are spirits of disorder. If you want to force those two magnets together, you have to force them together, because if you let them go, they will jump across away from each other on the table. That is an immutable law. Our Kra grounds us in divine order. Spirits of disorder have no Kra. They are repulsive to all spirits of order. So anytime they come together, it's because of a forced coming together, whether it's forced physically or it's forced mentally. When the black person has been brainwashed away from his or her culture and has been forced to accept this spirit of disorder as somebody that they need to embrace. This forced addiction, this forced perversity. When somebody gets hooked on crack cocaine, it's not because the body all of a sudden believes that the crack cocaine is very nourishing to the individual. The crack cocaine created an artificial attraction for the person. That's what the addiction is. It's an artificial attraction. The body is suffering every time the cocaine is put in the body. So it's destroying the body every time it's put in. So that addiction or magnetism towards the drug is an artificial magnetism, an artificial draw, an artificial attraction, but it's not a natural attraction. That's why when you follow that artificial attraction to its quote-unquote logical end, the person ends up dying from the addiction, from the poisoning, suffering all the way to the end. The same is true with regards to the whites and their offspring. There's no such thing as a natural attraction. It is absolutely impossible for an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person with a cra to be attracted to one of the whites and their offspring, a non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit person. They are naturally repulsive. So your cra is repelling them all the time. Your sum, your spirit is repelling them all the time. Whether they're a baby, whether they're in the womb as a zygote of a white female, your spirit is repelling that perverse spirit of disorder all the time, just like the two magnets on the table. However, if you end up being brainwashed by this culture, worshiping a fictional white character as a deity, or embracing some other pseudo-white religion, Islam, Christianity, Hebrewism, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, pseudo-New Age spirituality, pseudo-metaphysics, and so forth, then your natural repulsion for the whites and their offspring you suppress. Then you go and try to grab and embrace that perverse entity against the natural order. So you're just like when someone begins to smoke, the first time you smoke, people start coughing and hacking, your body coughs and hacks and tries to reject that poison. But then you keep forcing that poison into the body. Now you create a false attraction, a pseudo-attraction, quote-unquote addiction. You've perverted some of your cells. Now they start craving that which you have forced upon the body. And every time you put it in the body, it destroys the cell. So when people get brainwashed and believe that they are inferior and they need to embrace that which is inferior, that they have been made to believe is superior, then they seek to embrace something that their body is actually repelling at the same time. As you're moving towards the whites and their offspring, your cra is repelling you away from them, so you're creating a great deal of tension. Your cra is moving in one direction, and you're forcing yourself and your cra to come in the other direction to embrace the spirit of disorder. Now you're repelling your own cra. So anytime you have a forced or a coupling of an Afurakani person, Afuraitkaitnit person, and a non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit individual, then what you have is a forced coupling. So that forced coupling is a forced miscegenation. It is either a physical or it is a mental, spiritual rape because it is not natural. We naturally repel them. So when we talk about Bebra, reincarnation, because of rape, whether it's a physical assault kind of rape or because of the mental rape of the culture out of the Afurakani person during enslavement and afterwards, some brainwashed Negroes talk about they've fallen, quote-unquote, in love with the whites and their offspring, but they really are engaged in self-hatred. No matter what they say externally, they have a deeply seated self-hatred, so they're trying to force themselves to embrace a spirit of disorder that their akra is repelling all along. That forced miscegenation during enslavement and afterwards, sometimes, of course, a biracial child comes out of that forced copulation. Now, where does the child come from? What side of the family did that spirit come from? This is where we get a proper notion of identity from. When a child comes into a womb, the spirit enters the womb, the spirit came from somewhere. It either came from the mother's side of the family or the father's side of the family. If it's a forced miscegenation or forced coupling, meaning an interracial coupling, it either came from the black side of the family, it's one of those black ancestresses or ancestors, or as one of the non-black relatives of the white or the non-black individual. If it's a spirit of one of the non-black individuals, that spirit will enter the womb. But because it's physiologically the union of a sperm and ovum that comes from these two different groups, then the body of the child will be a quote-unquote biracial body. But the spirit is either one of the whites in their offspring, who used to live in previous lifetimes as one of the whites in their offspring, who has returned to this biracial body. It is a spirit of disorder without a cry, without an orrery, without a stelido, that is operating through a biracial body looking like one of our people. But it's not one of our people. It's that same white cracker from Ireland, cracker from England, from Spain, and so forth, this perverse spirit of disorder now operating through a light brown body with no crop. So it's still a spirit of disorder. That body of melanin will not make the individual have a crop. We're not forced to give them a crop just because the body is light brown. It is a spirit of disorder masquerading an Afuraitkaitnut individual for those who are unaware. If the spirit comes from one of the Afurakani ancestors or Afuraitkaitnit ancestresses, a spirit with a cry, an ancestor or ancestress who was guiding this black person throughout their lives as they grew up, but this black person was not listening to their ancestor or ancestresses, and now they copulate with one of the whites in their offspring, and one of their ancestors or ancestresses is from Afuraitkaitnut, is drawn into the womb, and now is forced, for example, into the womb of a white female and comes out with a light brown body, and now physiologically, this light brown body that this ancient Afuraitkaitnit ancestor or ancestress is operating through, part of the blood and DNA comes from the white female, this stranger that the black individual had come in contact with. Prior to that spirit coming to the womb, that spirit was directing their great-great-great-great-grandson, do not copulate with this spirit of disorder, creating all kinds of blocks to try to influence the individual. Do not copulate with this spirit of disorder. But this fool copulated with this white spirit of disorder and forced an Afurakani ancestor, an Afuraitkaitnit ancestress, to be drawn to that womb and come out with a light brown body and physiologically have a white quote-unquote mother or white quote-unquote parent. But in reality, this is that same Afurakani spirit who lived a couple of hundred years ago on the continent or in America during the enslavement process, someone who liberated our people from enslavement and so forth. Now he's forced to have a quote-unquote white parent. But that's not really his parent, because his descendant copulated with this fool and forced him to come through and be born to a white mother that's not really his mother. His people are that great large group of ancestresses and ancestors of Afuraitkaitnut that he's been interfacing with for thousands of years, because his descendants started moving towards one of these white Europeans or Asians or whatever. Now he's forced to be connected physiologically to that white cracker and their, relatives. So she'll start saying, well, this is my mother, this is your grandmother. This is your grandfather, these are your ancestresses and ancestors from Ireland and so forth, and you have Irish in your blood and you have African in your blood as well. In reality, all those white individuals from her family have nothing to do with her at all. So when people wake up and recognize what the identity is, then they connect with their Afuraitkaitnit family and they reject the white pseudo family. Now, here's the key. When the white female makes her transition, she's a white spirit, the same white criminal perverse spirit that she was when she was alive. She's the same spirit of disorder when she makes her transition. When this person is growing up and his white quote-unquote mother has made her transition, this is this white spirit who was a white spirit hundreds of years ago. She's still a white spirit now. He does not pour libation to this spirit of disorder. She has nothing to do with him. He does not do any kind of ritual towards the spirit of disorder. She has nothing to do with him. You don't evoke them. You don't pour libation. You don't set up shrines for them. These are spirits of disorder. When you come back to your natural mind, you recognize your real family is the Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnut family, irrespective of the fact that one of your descendants was foolish enough to connect with this criminal. But once you wake up, you totally disconnect from these spirits of disorder. If you do not do that, however, and you remain open to them, it's no different than if you have a house in a region where there are a great number of drug addicts, crackheads, and so forth, and they're looking around, walking around in the area trying to break into people's homes, and you leave your door wide open, and you go somewhere and you come back home and there's somebody sitting up in your house. If you leave your door open because you're not engaged in any process to repel or protect or defend your home from such an invader, then the invader will come in and take up residence in the home. If you don't reject spiritually these spirits of disorder and you leave yourself open to them because you don't generate that force of repulsion that's written into your spirit, that force of divine hate, you're divine, just like you have a physical immune system that repels cancer cells and destroys them. You also have a spiritual immune system that is the force of divine hate. The abosom, we talked about Benan, Abena, Ogun, and Iyami Abene, the forces in nature that govern divine hate, just like Ma'an, Ma'at govern divine law or love. Love and hate are two forces in creation governed by male and female divinity. And we go into detail about that in our book of Madanechi, Divine Law and Divine Hate. It is the whites and our offspring who attempted to teach us that hate is evil, hate is a negative emotion and all this nonsense. We trace the etymology of the word hate back to its origins, which comes from chet in ancient Kemet, meaning to break or destroy. This is why in Proto-Indo-European languages, ket means to break or destroy. This is what het or hate means, to break, destroy, reject, and so forth. In the Medutu, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet, you will see the man with a stick breaking and destroying something. This is where the term comes from. And it's also a title of the Abosom who govern divine hate. It's a part of their names. These are forces in nature, just like you have divinities of law, divinities of quote-unquote love, you have divinities of divine hate. And hate is one half of the created order. The universe comes into being through law, the expression of order, and it's sustained through hate, the impression of order. So we go into detail about that, talking about the expansive and contractive poles of divine order, divine law and divine law and divine hate. So when you don't utilize your immune system physically, if your immune system is compromised, then bacteria that normally would not affect you, that will bounce right off of you, they can invade your system and cause you to become bedridden. So when you develop your immune system, you repel these bacteria, destroy them with ease, without effort, because that force of divine repulsion, your immune system kills those cancerous cells, those negative bacteria, wages war against them on a consistent basis every moment of every day. As long as you're alive, your immune system is waging war against toxins from the outside, bacteria from the outside, as well as cancerous cells that have developed from within the inside. In the same fashion, your spirit body has a divine immune system, that force of divine repulsion that's constantly protecting you if you live in harmony with it. But if you compromise your physical immunity using drugs, not maintaining your health, poor diet, allowing yourself to be stressed and full of anxiety and so forth, you suppress your immunity. And now the things that normally you could repel, now they can assault you and take over. If you suppress your spiritual immunity because you've been brainwashed by the whites and their offspring, teaching you that hate is wrong and hate is evil and so forth, and you need to reject any desire you have to manifest divine hate, then you begin to suppress that. And when you suppress it, then these perverse spirits of disorder who normally would bounce right off of you that you could repel, you're allowing them an opening into your system. And now they begin to communicate with you. Now, when that white individual who is the quote-unquote mother of the physical biracial child, makes the transition, if he doesn't engage in real culture, engage in real ritual, and keep his spiritual immunity strong, that natural force of divine repulsion Just like you have magnets that attract and repel. The attraction is the divine law, the divine love aspect of the magnet, drawing those things that will bring balance to the individual. The repulsion aspect of the magnet is the divine hate, repulsion, rejection, that repels things. So if you don't keep both of those in balance, then what will happen is you won't repel the advances of this discarnate white spirit. They will communicate with you. They will take up residence in your home. They will attach themselves to your aura and so forth. And now these white spirits will constantly be trying to communicate with you and influence you from the spirit realm, just like they tried to influence you from the physical realm. And they are spirits of disorder when they are here, and they are the same criminal spirits of disorder when they make their transition. They don't become all of a sudden harmonious spirits of order because they die. They're the same criminal spirits of disorder they always were, that they have been for thousands of years, and that they will continue to be until we make them extinct. So we're going to read something from our Madanechi, divine law and divine hate, to punctuate this reality. And again, if you have a question or comment, we're going to take some questions or comments very soon. We want to go through this. Our book, Madanechi, divine law and divine hate. And we're going to looking at page 57, dealing with that. So the whole book is talking about divine order. The expansive pole of divine order is law. Law and love is the same word. We show that literally, phonetically, the V and the W evolved from the letter V of some hundreds of years ago. And then, so originally letter V, then it evolved into the U hundreds of years later, and then a few hundred years after that, it evolved into the double U, or two V's side by side, or two U's, double U side by side. This is why V and U, V and W is used interchangeably in European languages, like Sweden and Sweden, or William and Wilhelm, or William and so forth. The V and W is the same word, the same letter. The letters that the whites and offspring use, the alphabetical system that they use, the phonetic script that they use, comes directly from our people. They never created a script on their own. They did not create the script. They use it, the so-called Phoenician script, or the Proto-Sinaitic script, comes directly from ancient Kemet. The same is true of so-called Sanskrit and all of the other scripts. They come directly from our people. So the whites and offspring never created any alphabetical script at all. And that includes so-called Hebrew, which is nonsensical. It doesn't even exist in reality. There's no such thing in reality as a Hebrew language. In reality, they took our languages and our scripts, corrupted them, and then gave it a different title. So, so that's when we talk about V, U, and W. This is the same, functionally the same letter. So LV and LW, love and law, is the same word and same concept. In ancient Kemet, the term meh, meaning love or desire, and the term neh in Coptic, meaning law, is the same word and the same concept. Law, meh, and love, meh. Both words are the same concept. In our traditional culture, to be in love, quote unquote, with an individual or entity is to be in law with the individual or entity. That means you're functioning with regard to that individual or entity is reflective of divine order. It is a lawful or loveful, quote unquote, lawful relationship, governed by the male and female forces of divine law and balance, which are Ma'ah and Ma'at. So the female force is Ma'at, the male force is Ma'ah. We did a whole broadcast on Ma'ah and Ma'at and showed how they manifest in the Yoruba tradition. Odu is Ma'at, Edun is actually Ma'ah, Amame is Ma'at, and Akan, Abam is Ma'ah. And we go into detail about that, and then we show that, of course, in ancient Kemet as well. So that is the expansive pole of divine order, law, quote-unquote love, but law. Ma'an, Ma'at, the male and female force of divine law and balance. It is through law that you attract those things, objects, deeds, and entities that will bring balance to your life. Law brings balance. This is why the term Ma'an in ancient Kemet means law, but it also means balance. Through law, you attract. It's an instrument that attracts balance to your life. When you adhere to law, then you bring stability and balance to your life. If you get outside of divine law, then disorder manifests. So law is an instrument that attracts balance to your life. Of course, love in the true sense is law, so that's why love attracts your balance to your life. That is the expansive pole of divine order, because when you adhere to law, by attracting those things, objects, deeds, and entities into your life that are harmonious, then your sphere of influence and awareness expands. That's why law is the expansive pole of divine order. Hate is the contractive pole of divine order. Through hate, you reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities you need to reject in order to maintain the integrity of the divine order. So the immune system and lymphatic system are the physical agents of the divine hate, divine rejection in your body. They maintain the integrity of your body, of your organism, by rejecting cancerous cells, toxins, and bacteria and so forth that otherwise would destroy your entire system. So if you say you don't like the word hate, then just say, I don't want to have an immune system. I'll just let my immune system shut down. What will happen if your immune system shuts down? It doesn't matter that all of your other systems are working properly, like the circulatory system and the integumentary system and the endocrine system and so forth, skeletal, muscular, all of that, digestive, excretory. If you don't have an immune system, they all collapse. If you don't have that force that repels disorder for the maintenance of the integrity of the organism, then everything collapses. So if you say you don't embrace hate, you're foolish. You're embracing the whites in their offspring. They don't want you to embrace hate, because when you embrace divine hate, you embrace the repulsion of disorder and its purveyors and its agents, which is them. And therefore, when you repel them consistently, they will not be able to control you, so they have to make you believe that rejecting them and anything else is wrong, because they want to dominate you at all times. That's what a parasite does. So imagine cancerous cells trying to communicate to the rest of the body and telling the rest of the body, listen, forget about the immune system and those little natural killer cells, T cells, white blood cells, and so forth. They are evil. They are immature. That's why they're always seeking to destroy and kill us, the cancerous cells. They need to stop focusing on hating us so much and focus on other things, because they're being silly and immature. And the cancer cells try to convince all the other cells in the body to not embrace the immune system cells and to just leave them alone and ask them to stop operating the way they do. If the cells listen to the criminal cancerous cells and reject their immunity, then the cancerous cells will take over the body. And this is exactly what's happening when the whites in their offspring try to convince people in their pseudo-psychological breakdowns that hate is just a negative emotion, pseudo-spirituality, talking about hate brings a lower level of energy and it weighs you down and you're not able to become enlightened. People talking all of that nonsense are foolish. They're brainwashed by the whites in their offspring. They are controlled and dominated by the whites in their offspring. This is why they're spouting that nonsense. So hate is the contractive pole of order. Law or love is the expansive pole of order. Through law or love, you attract those things, objects, deeds, and entities you need to attract to bring balance to your life, to harmonize your thoughts, intentions, and actions with order. So therefore, your sphere of influence expands, your sphere of awareness expands fully. That's the expansive pole of order. So creation is created through law, the expansive pole of order. And things are attracted and formed based on that law, which is the expression of order. That lawful order is maintained and protected and sustained through hate, through the divine rejection of disorder. So anything that comes in to upset that order is destroyed. This is why we talk about creation that comes into being through law, the expression of order, and it is sustained through hate, the impression of order. Divine hate impresses or imprints the parameters within which we need to operate with regard to divine order. If we operate outside of those parameters, we're in disorder and we are eliminated. So divine hate is the impression of order. Divine law is the expression of order. Expression and impression are expansive and contractive poles of divine order. And there are divinities of law, ma'an ma'at, and divinities of hate, Arubehudet and Sechima, Bena and Abana and Akan, Ogun and Iyami in the Yoruba tradition, Ogu and Ananu and Vodun and so forth. All Afurakani and Afuraitkaitnit people, wherever we are in the world, recognize the forces in nature that govern divine law and divine hate. So we go into detail about that in our book. Now, let's read from this section so we can even punctuate this further, and then we're going to get into some other information as well. And let me just check the, so a couple of statements in the chat room. So what we want to do, we're going to read through this, and then we're going to take a couple of questions, and then we're going to get into the other information dealing with indigenization of people in certain land masses, our people specifically, and only. All right. So page 57 of Maranechi, divine law, love, and divine hate. And we'll put that link back in the chat room. All right, so we say when an individual who engaged in perverse acts like rape is killed, the spirit of the rapist still hovers, ill affecting those in the community who are spiritually receptive. This is one reason why we engage in ritual purification to rid our homes and the village of negative spirit. When an individual who was a corrupt traditional priest or priestess dies, he or she sometimes will remain earthbound, ill affecting those in the community who are spiritually receptive. These and other spirits like them, non-initiates, are often used for negative ritual purposes, misnomered witchcraft. Yet, even those discarnate, deceased spirits who do not participate in such deliberately evil activities are still spirits who were infected with a perverse worldview, lusts, misguided thoughts, etc., and will stimulate that infection within the population if the population is not careful. So you have some individuals who are criminal. They were rapists, murderers, and so forth, as well as, criminal traditional priests and priestesses, and they make their transition. And their criminal spirits are still hanging around the place where they were murdered, where they died, and so forth, and they will ill affect people in those areas, people who are a little bit receptive, whether it's children or adults. They can see the spirits in the room, and they can feel them. Those spirits are trying to convince them to engage in negative behavior, engage in self-destructive behavior, and so forth. Their spirits are still hovering, they're still earthbound. So, of course, we engage in purifications to rid our homes of these negative spirits. This is something we've been doing for thousands of years, whether it's on the continent as well as in North, Central, and South America. We haven't lost that understanding. In hoodoo, which is the Akan tradition that was brought to North America, voodoo was brought by the Fon and Ebe people to North America. Juju, which is actually brought by the Yoruba people to North America. It would be later on that hoodoo and voodoo and juju became terms that were used as catch-all terms for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, and such religion in general in North America. But originally, these terms come from these languages, these people, and these cultures. When you look at the various cultures and the way they operate and manifest, you see that this is where these cultures come from, where these terms come from. And of course, we recently released our book, Hoodoo People, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in North America, Akan, custodians of hoodoo from ancient hoodoo or Unduru land, which is ancient Kanit, ancient Nubia. So we prove all of that. But you have these, we engage in ritual purification to move these spirits out of the home, out of the environment, to maintain balance in the environment. When they show up, we have ritual things we do to repel them. This is divine immunity. This is divine hate. Every time you engage in purification, rituals repel negative spirits, you're engaged in divine hate. As an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut person, you're rejecting disorder and its agents, its purveyors, for the maintenance of divine order and balance within your life, within your body, within your spirit, within your environment. That is a function of divine hate, the impression of divine order. You are imprinting upon your environment, upon your spirit, the parameters within which things must operate in a harmonious fashion. Anything that seeks to come into the environment that disrupts the order, you imprint the divine order by repelling these negative spirits. So you're engaged in divine hate, whether you like to admit it or not. So the best thing you should do is reject the foolish conditioning from the whites and their offspring and embrace reality, because divine hate is reality. There's a male and female force, again, of divine hate. And in ancient Kemet, hate is part of their actual title. So we understand that. So when we engage in these ritual purifications, this is what we're doing for these criminal-type negative spirits. But even for the ones who are not criminal, they were just ignorant. They were controlled by lust when they were alive. They were controlled by misguided desire. They were, always engaged in smoking, weed, drinking, doing other things, self-destructive, lazy, idle, and everything else. Controlled by vice, controlled by lust. They weren't necessarily criminals trying to deliberately hurt people, but they weren't productive either. They weren't aligning with their own craft, executing their function in creation. They weren't living a harmonious lifestyle. They were self-destructive, controlled by lust, and so forth. When they make their transition, they're still weak spirits who are still controlled by lust and vice and so forth. When their spirits are around, as well as the spirits of those criminal types are around, even if the ones who are not criminal but they're around, their energy affects the people that they're around. And if you don't recognize that there's some other entity in the area, some discarnate relative who's attached to you, or a non-relative who attaches himself or enters your environment, if you're not aware, if you're not astute, if you're not attuned, then you start feeling their influence. They begin to stimulate the infection of a perverse worldview within you. So then you start moving towards, just like they used to try to rationalize their misguided desires, their lust for engaging in self-destructive activity, drug use and everything else. Then you start feeling these rationalizations for engaging in self-destructive activity. And when you start seeking to engage in it, all of this flood of rationalizations, well, it's okay, you should do this, nothing wrong with it, we all do this. You start feeling a flood of rationalizations coming from these individuals or entities that are stimulating this infection within you. So if you're not careful, that can happen. And of course, the criminal-type entities, they will seek to influence you as well. And if there was miscegenation, those white, corrupt spirits, and all of them are corrupt if they're non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit, they will attempt to influence your worldview as well from the spirit realm. Again, this is one reason why we engage in ritual purification to rid our homes and the village of negative spirits so that these spirits will not corrupt the minds, the Adwini, and hence the proper worldview of and the behavior of the community. We have an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African worldview, which is simply the view of the world as it is, rooted in divine order. The way the world is structured, the way it functions harmoniously, the way that forces in nature interface with one another and maintain this orderly world that we live in, this creation, and then we replicate that order when we are establishing our societies. Therefore, we have civilizations, a social order rooted in the divine order of creation, whereas the whites and their offspring have societies, but they don't have civilization because they can't attune to the forces of nature. They're repelled by them. It's like the large magnet repelling the other magnet across the table. They can't attune to the forces of nature. Therefore, they cannot attune to divine order. Therefore, they cannot replicate a divinely ordered structure when they're establishing a society. Their societies reflect their perverse nature, their disordered nature. This is why their societies operate the way they have for thousands of years, and they will continue until we make them extinct. So they create societies, we create civilized societies or civilizations, a social order rooted in the divine order of creation. And our worldview is a reflection of that divine order. These perverse spirits who are controlled by lust and or malice, evil intent, they will seek to infect your thinking, your thoughts, intentions, and actions, just like bacteria seeks to consume you and disrupt your natural functioning. Cancer cells seek to disrupt your natural functioning. The cancer cells in the body of black humanity, physical and spiritual, are the whites and their offspring, and they seek to disrupt your natural functioning. That corrupts your worldview, the view of the world as it is, the view based on divine order. And then you begin to engage in behavior that's reflective of disorder. So this is why we engage in those ritual purifications, to repel these negative entities. When such ritual purifications for the expulsion of these negative spirits are not conducted, such negative spirits will pervert the thinking, analysis of some within the population, and hence the ability to properly examine an issue using ma'an ma'at as the standard of measurement. Divine law as the standard of measurement. The major instigators of such perversions are those Achiwadiefo spirits, the whites and their offspring, spirits of disorder, who invaded our family lines when they were alive through the raping of our women and girls during enslavement and other periods of our protracted war with them, a war which will not end until we make them extinct, unless we make the conscious decision to cut the Achiwadiefo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, off from their flimsy, forced connection they made to our blood circle through rape. And remember, rape is a forced coupling, whether it's forced through brainwashing, like a black male connecting with a white female, or forced through rape, a white male raping a black female. Either way, it's rape. This flimsy forced connection they made to our blood circle through rape, unless we make the conscious decision to cut them off, then their spirits will continue to work to pervert our thinking, our worldview, and ultimately our behavior. So this is how they begin not only to infect our thinking in the physical world, putting forward a false image of a divinity, a filthy, degenerate cracker saying this is the God, and you have millions of black people getting on their knees at night praying to this fictional cartoon character, Jesus, or believing in a fictional cartoon character, Muhammad, or a fictional cartoon character, Allah, or Yahweh, Brahman, Buddha, whatever it is, straightening out our hair, lightening our skin, wearing colored contacts, doing everything we can to emulate those who are inferior to us physically and spiritually. That's brainwashing in the physical world. But when they make their transition, they continue to force those infections and try to influence our spirits, specifically those who came into the blood circle, polluted the blood circle through miscegenation. They are the major instigator. Now, the white so-called slave master who raped an Afuraitkaitnut woman or girl and impregnated her became the quote-unquote father of a quote-unquote mixed child. When that child grew up and had children, whose children subsequently grew up and had children and grandchildren, these children and grandchildren would and will at times be visited by this white perverse spirit, the spirit of their so-called slave master, pseudo quote-unquote forebearer, who has a connection via pollution to their blood. If these children and grandchildren are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit spirits who reincarnated directly from the blood circle of the Afuraitkaitnit women, or Afurakani men in the families, and the white rapist who polluted their blood circle is not truly their great-grandparent. He is simply an invader who can be easily expelled from the family spirit blood circle ritually for good, forever. However, if he is not expelled, his spirit will use the polluted blood connection to constantly whisper in the ears of those Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut. He will show up in their dreams and or visions calling himself Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Moses, Brahman, an angel, or any other white figure that the family has been brainwashed into worshiping. They'll just lie. Just like they lied when they were here, they will lie on the other side. They'll come into the dreams of the person. The person is dreaming. They've been brainwashed with Christianity anyway. So they have a dream, and this cracker shows up. And he was a Portuguese slave master with long cobweb hair and a mustache and a beard. When he shows up in the dream, brainwashed black person thinking, oh, this is the Lord Jesus, are you Jesus? He'll say, yeah, I'm Jesus, just to brainwash you further, control and dominate you further. Or I'm Muhammad, or to continue to keep you locked into that foolishness. He may help the individuals find some money or assist them in some other fashion in order to gain their trust. You go to get a car loan, he whispers in the ear to the person who is about to tell you, you can't get the loan. and the person sitting in the chair has this overwhelming urge to say, yes, we're going to finance you. And when they go home later, they say, well, I was about to decline this individual, but I just had this overwhelming urge to say yes, so I just went ahead and said yes. Because they were influenced. They didn't even know they were being influenced in that fashion. Just because some little criminal, discarnate entity is whispering, influencing them to say yes, yes, yes. So, in that sense, they quote-unquote helped you get a car. It's nothing spiritual, has nothing to do with spiritual power, has nothing to do with the divinities, has nothing to do with any little silly ritual you may have done and you prayed to them and so forth, or you're reading the book, reading the Bible and citing Psalms and all this other nonsense. They're sitting down waiting for you to go through all that nonsense, pseudo-empty ritual. You're burning little incenses and so forth to these little criminals. They wait for you to do all that, let you believe that you're actually doing something with that. That has no effect on them whatsoever, because they know, as criminal spirits of disorder, even when they were here on earth, they're the ones who manufactured the foolishness in the Bible itself. In our book, The Kuku Tuntun, The Ancestral Jurisdiction, we prove that Muhammad never existed, Moses never existed, Jesus, Yeshua never existed, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, Aaron, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Buddha, so forth. None of these characters existed. We show how they were manufactured, when they were manufactured, what deities from ancient Kemet, descriptive titles were taken from to create these fictional cartoon characters. The whites and offspring already knows none of these characters existed. So when you're sitting around reading the Bible, reading some Psalms or reading the Quran and taking little prayers from the Quran, writing them down in Arabic on pieces of paper, saying little incantations over them, rolling them up and putting them inside little talismans, thinking you're actually doing something, the discarnate criminal spirit is just sitting down waiting for you to go through all that foolishness, saying, look at this idiot doing all of this. And once you get done, then they'll go ahead and help you out and make you believe the reason why they helped you out is because you did those little empty rituals, which further binds you to the pseudo-ritual. So, only real rituals are connected to actual forces in nature, and they will direct you as to the kind of offerings and so forth that will generate the kind of energy that opens their gateway for you to realign with them in a harmonious fashion. Ancestral, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated, as well as the Abosom, the forces in nature, they have real ritual associated with them, which helps us to align our spirits with them in a harmonious fashion. Outside of that, everything else is just a little pseudo-ritual. So, this discarnate spirit may help the individual, the Afuraitkaitnit individual, find some money or assist them in some other fashion in order to gain their trust. Once gained, this blind trust can be the channel through which this criminal spirit floods them with misinformation about quote-unquote God, whites, etc., without the fear that the Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut will reject the misinformation. Such machinations have been carried on within some of our families for centuries because we have been misguided with regard to the nature of disembodied spiritual, quote-unquote, communication. Ideas planted in our minds, thoughts, and how to critically and ritually assess them and repel them. So we have been conditioned to believe that either there's no such thing as quote-unquote ghosts, and if you see anything or hear anything or feel anything, you are mentally unstable and you need to go to a psych ward. So when you do experience actual Samanfo, ancestresses and ancestors, then you get scared because you think that you're crazy, or you know that you're not crazy, but then you know that other people are going to think you're crazy, and then that creates so much anxiety within you that you begin to have, anxiety disorders, major depressive disorder, and so forth. You create a great deal of stress. Your body begins to secrete hormones out of cycle. You have panic attacks and so forth. Then you're going to get medication, and then you just want to check out of this reality because the pain and shame and so forth is too much to bear. Then people say, man, this person's behavior is disjointed. They've been manifesting all kinds of discarnate or discordant behavior. They need to go see somebody. And then that creates even more anxiety for the individual. But if they're embracing ancestral religion, knock it all right out. So, because you know the nature of communication coming from these Nsamafo, you know they're real, and there's a place for you in your culture because you are receptive enough to see them, hear them, and communicate with them, and know how to repel them once you get back in line with reality. But because we've been brainwashed, any disembodied communication from a disembodied spirit, we either say it's the devil, we either say it's we're making up something and we're mentally ill, or for the brainwashed Negroes, oh, it's spirituality. Oh, these are my spirit guides. Oh, these are the deities. Oh, these are the Orisha. Oh, these are the angels. Oh, this is, my spirit helpers and all this other nonsense. So then when these white spirits show up and start trying to teach you and brainwash you from the spirit realm with misinformation, you just begin to accept it. And when they tell you don't hate, hate is wrong, and they give you a pang of anxiety every time you think about hating a white person, then they push you spiritually, and then you feel a little tinge, and you're like, uh-oh, I shouldn't be hating anybody. That's my spirit guide telling me that's wrong. That's my soul telling me that's wrong to do. In reality, this is a criminal trying to control you because they don't want you to embrace divine hate, because you get back in harmony with the forces in nature that govern divine hate, and you will repel the cracker and that criminal spirit, and they won't be able to control and dominate you anymore. It's like a pimp controlling a little teenage girl. If somebody comes along and removes the pimp, then that's a problem for him. So he tries to do anything he can to make sure that she doesn't ally herself with people who will come and support her and eliminate him. So he's always trying to keep her away from those who will communicate the truth to her so that he can continue to dominate her for the rest of her life. This is what the whites and offspring are doing from the spirit realm, just like they do here in the physical world. Discarnate earthbound spirits who are perverse can also dwell in various environments. Just as a discarnate spirit who died or was murdered in a house may dwell in that house for centuries, ill affecting, quote-unquote, haunting anyone who moves into the house and lives there. So do such spirits take up residence in trees, caves, along riverbanks, in the forest, in villages, etc. This has occurred in Afuraitkaitnut, Africa for millennia. It is these kinds of wayward spirits that are utilized in the practice of negative, quote-unquote, witchcraft. Some individuals in society will manipulate a homeless drug addict to commit crimes for them. They will offer to pay or feed the homeless addict. If the addict steals for them, murders for them, etc. What happens when such an addict dies? Often they become earthbound spirits who continue to work for those who will ritually feed them. These spirits can be sent to spiritually attack, murder, etc., as long as they are fed by an unscrupulous so-called priest or priestess or other. Many other individuals who live disordered lives as well, upon the transition of death, become spirits employed in such a fashion. This is common knowledge amongst Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut. What has become less common knowledge, however, is that these perverse, discarnate spirits of deceased human beings are fraudulently promoted by unscrupulous and or ignorant priests and priestesses as deities, as Abosom, Orisha, Bodu, etc. Such spirits will also fraudulently promote themselves as deities. So when people make their transition and they already were corrupt, all they lived for was that 5 to 10, 15 minute high from the crack or some other drug. They were denied food and anything else just to get that high, and they died in that condition. The thing that gives them their high now is when you ritually sacrifice an animal for them or give some kind of offering. That sacrifice of the animal, the release of that blood, a little infusion of electromagnetic energy, just like that 5 minute high with the crack cocaine. Nothing spiritual about it. Nothing spiritual about the chemical reaction from the crack cocaine that gives the person that sense of euphoria. There's nothing spiritual about when they kill an animal and their release of electromagnetic energy from the blood that lasts for a short period that this discarnate spirit feeds off of. They want that high, just like they wanted it when they were alive. They're doing exactly what they did when they were alive, they're doing it now. And when an unscrupulous pseudo-priest or priestess works with such individuals, just like when they were alive, tell the crackhead, go listen in on this person and see what they're talking about. Listen by their their door, put your ear to their door, listen, and come back over here, take the bus over here, and come over here and tell me what they said. Then the crackhead will do that. When they make their transition, they tell that crackhead spirit, go to this person's house, visit their dream, tell me what's going on in their life, and come back and tell me, and I'll kill an animal for you. I'll make a sacrifice for you. They will go and do it and come back. And then when the person that they were informing on comes to the so-called priest or priestess for divination, then the priest will say, oh, you were thinking about this last night, you had this dream last night, you're going through this and this. And the individual is floored because they think that the person must be dealing with the deities or else they couldn't know what was going on in their personal life. And in reality, they were just informed upon by a crackhead spirit who wanted some crack. And he did whatever he needed to do to get some crack. That's all that's happening. Now, such spirits dwelling in the forest, inhabiting a certain tree, will be present when a scrupulous or unscrupulous priest or priestess uses elements of that tree to fashion an amulet, talisman, or shrine for protection. The spirit will often make a unilateral attempt to take up residence in the newly fashioned amulet, talisman, or shrine, or be invited by the unscrupulous priest or priestess to take up residence in the amulet, talisman, or shrine. The scrupulous but misguided priestess will utilize the talisman, amulet, or shrine and suffer greatly. He or she may give the amulet, talisman, or shrine to a client, and the client will suffer greatly. The unscrupulous priest or priestess, however, will utilize the talisman, amulet, or shrine now occupied by the perverse spirit as a weapon. He or she will give ritual offerings to the spirit, feed it, and direct it to execute perverse tasks for him or her. The discarnate spirit will also carry out certain tasks for the client of the unscrupulous priestess or priest to gain the client's trust. Then it will withhold its influence under the strategic direction of the unscrupulous priest or priestess, thereby forcing the client to return to the priest or priestess for a quote-unquote reading or divination in order to figure out what went wrong. So you're given a shrine, this little crackhead spirit is connected to it. It was a crackhead spirit who got killed by that tree 1,000 years ago. It's still hanging around that tree. You come and get some of the bark of the tree to make some medicine, create a talisman based on that medicine. That spirit attaches itself to that little talisman. The talisman is brought back into the village or to the house, given to a client. The client takes the talisman into that house, and this little crackhead type spirit has been hanging around that tree for 1,000 years, is now hanging around the medicine from the bark of that tree that's wrapped up in this shrine, this little talisman. Now it's in your house. The unscrupulous priest who gave it to you will tell you this is all you need to do to call on this deity, quote-unquote deity, really the crackhead spirit that they're promoting as a deity. You say this prayer, you do this, and the spirit will respond. The deity will respond. And you do these rituals to this little spirit, and you go through these little methodical rituals, meticulous rituals, and every time you do it, the deity does what you ask them to do, the spirit. But then one day they don't do what you tell them to do, ask them to do. Then you keep doing your rituals over and over again, and they don't respond, and then you begin to panic. What's going on? They're withholding their influence deliberately. The little rituals you were doing have no effect on the spirit. They just sit by and let you do that nonsense to make you think you're doing something. It doesn't matter what you say, what prayer you say, they don't care. Just like an alcoholic doesn't care what's inside the whiskey bottle. They don't care if it's Seagram's. They don't care if it's any other brand. All the stuff on the outside means nothing. They just want what's in the bottle. All the little extra rituals that you're doing, the little prayers, the little breaking, using eggs and using all these different things, crackhead spirits don't care anything about that. That has no effect on them at all. They're just sitting by patiently, waiting for you to go through all these little silly steps. And once you're done, if they decide they want to help you in what you're doing, they'll do it to gain your trust. And they'll do it a few times in a row, maybe a few months in a row. Then one day you do the same rituals and they decide, this time I'm not going to do it. Or under the direction of the unscrupulous priest, they tell them, hey, don't help him this time. Let him panic, let him get scared. And you keep doing the rituals and nothing is working. Now you're forced to go back to that priest or priestess and say, hey, what went wrong? I've been doing my rituals and so forth and nothing happened. I'm still suffering. And then the priest does a little fake divination and said, oh, well, we see something else is happen. You're going to have to give me some more money. I'm going to have to do some more, sacrifices because this is worse than what we thought. You're going to have sex with me and all this other nonsense. And they're just running game on the client, the so-called client. And they wonder what's working. So they consult the little fake deity, returns with an answer that usually requires that the client give more money, sex, sacrifice that which is valuable to them, etc. This creates fear within the client and a perverse dependency on the fake, quote-unquote, deity, the little crackhead spirit, and the unscrupulous priest or priest. The client is sometimes, quote-unquote, initiated as a priest or priestess of the spirit, little fake deity. They're like, well, it looks like you need to be initiated. That'll be $5,000. Now they scratch and scrape to save up $5,000 so they can go through some 7-day initiation process to a crackhead spirit. And the initiation is absolutely meaningless. The little crackhead spirit is just sitting down, just like he would sit down on the corner watching cars drive by. He's sitting in the corner of the house watching you go through all these rituals, animals being killed and all this other nonsense. When it's his turn, on cue, unscrupulous priest tells him to come along, then he shows up, and they say, okay, you tell the client this, tell them that, make them believe that they're initiated to something. Now they just got $5,000 out of you, fear and dependence, and now you're locked into this pseudo-priest with this fake deity, which is just a crackhead. Now, it is these kinds of unscrupulous pseudo-priests or priestesses and discarnate, disordered spirits promoted falsely as deities. Those are the ones who work with the whites and their offspring and seek them out. It is these kinds of perverse, discarnate, earthbound spirits falsely promoted as deities that lie about the nature of the real deities, the real Abosom. It is these kinds of perverse, discarnate spirits posing as Abosom or Orisha and so forth that promote the false ideas that the Abosom accept human sacrifice, for example, outside of capital punishment. Capital punishment is sacred and divine. Human sacrifice isn't. Just sacrificing, some people still engage in that on the continent because they're following these criminal, deceased spirits, many of whom were Muslims who invaded, made their transition, and still trying to influence us negatively from the other side, posing as divinity. Brainwashed Negroes who were Moors and so forth, invading ancient civilizations in Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, and so forth. And these little criminal spirits are still hanging around pretending that they're deity. And for those who fall for that nonsense, they're like, oh, well, I'm a deity. You need to kill this individual and sacrifice him to me so that you can bring balance to your village. And brainwashed Negroes will run along with that. And then many of them know what's really going on, but they, fraudulently promote these deities, these criminals as deities. So, these criminal spirits will pose as deities, promote ideas like human sacrifice is accepted by the divinities outside of capital punishment, that the deities are just deified ancestors, that sometimes they get drunk and smoke and they work with the churches, you need to use the Bible, you need to use the Quran, you need to use Jewish symbols and all this other nonsense. They will lie to you. They will tell you that they're extraterrestrials and extraterrestrialism is real and all of that garbage. They will lie directly to you, control your mind, control your thinking, and so forth. All kinds of nonsense. So, and then we talk about how these spirits are connected to these different little talismans, shrines, and so forth. So we're talking about unscrupulous priests and priestesses who are really no longer real priests and priestesses because the Abosom, when you engage in disorder, the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, if you are initiated to them, if you engage in disorder, they will leave your shrine and not come back. They're not bound to your shrine. You don't control them. They are the forces in nature. They are in control. As soon as you get outside of living in harmony with this divine force in nature, they will separate themselves from you and no longer work with you. And there are many people who are, initiated in the Yoruba tradition, Akan, Vodun, and so forth, and they may have had a shrine in the beginning, but because they engage in disorder, ignorance, criminality, and so forth, the Abosom withdraw their influence. So they have a pot in their house, but that pot is empty. And the only kind of spirit that will take up residence in that pot from that point on is some criminal, discarnate spirit who is just like the individual who's a criminal or a liar or ignorant and lustful and so forth. And those are the kind of discarnate spirits that are taking up residence at their shrines, in their pots, with their talismans and so forth. And they are, quote-unquote, initiating some of our people to these quote-unquote deities, which are really alcoholic spirits, crackhead spirits, lustful spirits. Some of them were child molesters, some of them were rapists, thieves, everything else. This is what people are dealing with. This is why when you go into some of these Ilays and Abosom Fie and Humporas and so forth, you start noticing beyond certain rituals and songs and dances that something is wrong with the character of the priests and priestesses, something is wrong with the way that they're operating, things don't seem correct, they're teaching things, that some things are correct, but some things seem ridiculous, but then you're like, well, I'm new to this, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, maybe I need to change my paradigm, maybe I'm too Western in my thinking, and they will try to make you believe that. All that nonsense. Your crowd telling you what's real. Your Nsamanfo are telling you what's real. They're pointing out that these fools don't have anything that they claim to have. So, this is what's going on with our people. People start rationalizing insanity, engaging in all kinds of self-destructive, disordered behavior. Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion has always had ritual mechanisms to expose and eradicate such negative spirits from contacting the family and community, as well as mechanisms to identify unscrupulous priests and priestesses, so-called. Yet when we do not avail ourselves of these mechanisms or do not recognize that they even exist, we succumb to the perverse influence, misinformation, the perverse, quote-unquote, worldview promoted by such disordered spirits, the Achiwadiyefo, spirits of disorder, and their black followers. This misinformation gives rise to insane rationalization. Adherence to such insane rationalizations causes us to engage in behavior and establish institutions that perpetuate misguided thinking and behavior, even under the auspices of Pan-African nationalism and other forms. Ultimately, this only serves to perpetuate white rule. So through that miscegenation, forced coupling, whether it's physical assault, rape, or mental rape, where the black individual is brainwashed to believe that they should not reject the whites and their offspring, but they should go to them and embrace them and copulate with them. That's a mental rape, because if you're in your right mind, you repel all of them, living and deceased, without fail and without compromise, without exception. So through miscegenation, through rape, through coupling with spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, you invite these criminal-type entities into your family through copulation, and then the discarnate, wayward white spirits who are connected to them and so forth, they will seek to influence you. Just like if you leave your door open and you let some transients come into your house and they start trying to tell you what to do in your house and what's right and what's wrong. If you do not put them out, they will try to take over the house. If you do not put out these criminal spirits from that flimsy connection to your blood circle, ritually repelling them for good, then they will seek to control you mentally and control your thoughts, control and pervert your worldview, and therefore pervert your behavior. And then you will begin to embrace the whites and their offspring. They will seek to make you ally with them against your own people. They will endear you to them. That weapon of endearment, perverse endearment, is what they use to separate our people. So our people can be connected with one another, having a good conversation, and as soon as one of us says we're against the whites and their offspring, then the other individual says, well, wait a minute, my mother is white. My grandmother was white, my great-grandmother was white, and I can't go along with that. If it's the decision between me connecting with you and the rest of the black community, or me protecting my white grandparents and so forth, I'm going to side against the rest of the black community. Therefore, the whites and their offspring, even from the spirit realm, have just separated the black family, because these criminal spirits of disorder have corrupted the mind of the individual, making them believe that, hey, this is my grandmother, this is my mother. In reality, this is a criminal invader into your blood circle. if a person broke into your house right now, put everybody in handcuffs and threw them in the basement, and then they just lived on the first floor of the house for years while they forced you into the basement. You may be living in the same house, but these are not your family. And if they decide to loosen up your handcuffs and give you the kind of food that you always liked, serve it to you in the basement, treat you a quote-unquote a little bit better, that doesn't mean that they're your family members. They're the criminals who are in the house. If they decide to let you come upstairs one day after a few years of being forced to live in the basement and sit on the couch you used to sit on, that doesn't mean that they're your family members. They're still invaders. The only thing that you need to do is cut their damn heads off. You don't embrace them. You don't say, well, we've been living together for so long, now we're all part of the same family. They will remain invaders no matter how long they remain in the house. As long as they're in the house, they are invaders. Until you put them out, that's the only time balance will be restored. In fact, when you kill them, that's when balance will be restored. When these white criminal spirits invade your blood circle through rape, and all miscegenation is rape, as we have shown, as we have proven, they are invaders into the ancestral blood circle. But the key is the blood may be mixed, but the soul cannot be mixed. Wotumi fra moja nso wotumi mfra okra. The blood may be mixed, but the soul is not. You can't mix a okra and ori inu. You can't mix a sum, a spirit. Somebody can pollute the blood, but they cannot mix the soul. Your soul is assigned to you by the Supreme Being pre-incarnation. That has nothing to do with the whites and offspring. They don't have that. They don't have that connection. Okay, so we have one more piece to go through. We're going to look at some of these comments in the chat room. If you have a question on the phone line, you can hit the number 1. There are 2 minutes left in the broadcast online, but if you want to hear beyond 11 o'clock, all you have to do is call in, but you only have 2 minutes to call in. 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have 2 minutes to call in so you can get on the phone line and hear the rest of the broadcast. We're not going to go too much longer, but we have one more section to go through. So all those in the chat room are listening online. 657-383-0635. You have 1 minute and 45 seconds to call in. All right. So the key here is this notion of endearment. So they use endearment to rein some of in. And when they endear themselves to you by treating you quote-unquote nice, that has nothing to do with bringing balance to your situation. They treat you quote-unquote nice to endear you to them. So once you are endeared to them, you will go against the rest of our population. That is the reason that they pollute the blood circle through rape to enter into the blood circle to separate our community. It always serves their interest. Because when we are in our right states of mind, we recognize who we are and we recognize who they are. We recognize who we are as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, connected to the forces in nature, what our culture is, and we recognize them as spirits of disorder who deserve to be eradicated, not embraced, with no exception, living and deceased. So therefore, they can't control people who recognize that they are the enemy. So they have to endear some of us to them so that those of us who become endeared to them will go against the rest of our population. That is the only reason they engage in any form of quote-unquote niceties with regard to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut population. They've been running that game where they have been able to for the past few thousand years. Began in ancient Kemet when the Greeks and the Romans invaded. They began to try to identify themselves with our culture. The Greeks began to dress like the people of ancient Kemet, build temples like the people of ancient Kemet, take on the names of the people of ancient Kemet, utilize the language, use the Medusa, the hieroglyphics, and so forth, start making white images of Kemetic divinities and so forth, all imitating our people, trying to fuse with our people, to pollute our people, to control our people, to divide our loyalties. to endear themselves to a certain percentage of the weak amongst our people. Therefore, those weak people will defend the enemy and go against their own people. And that happens today. So there are some people, you tell them, hey, the whites and their offspring are spirits of disorder. That is how they incarnate. So there's no exception to that reality. They were spirits of disorder before they got into the womb. They're defined as spirits of disorder because they have no cry. They have no divinity dwelling in the head region. They repelled that long ago. This is why they are the whites and their offspring. So anytime you see any one of them, just by virtue of the fact that that's who they are, they have no cry, no orderi, no selido, that defines them as a spirit of disorder. They don't have an anchor in divine order. This is why they operate in a disharmonious fashion. So when you recognize that and you operate accordingly, the brainwashed individual who has been endeared, criminally endeared to the whites and their offspring because they were a little bit nice to them, they will defend the spirit of disorder against the larger Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut population. And if they have to make a decision that they will separate and not interact or interface with certain black people because those black people are against the whites and their offspring, now the whites and their offspring have effectively separated these two black individuals. These two black individuals were engaged in conversation, having a wonderful conversation, exchanging information, connecting in different ways, connecting to other people, so they were all sharing cultural information and so forth. But as soon as the topic of the whites and their offspring comes up, then a separation occurs. That's proof, no matter how quote-unquote pseudo-conscious these individuals believe that they are, if they will draw the line where the whites and their offspring are on one side and they stay on that side and they reject the rest of the black population because no matter what, they're like, I'm down with you on everything you're saying, but when it comes to the point where you reject the whites and their offspring, then that's where we depart. And if we have to separate over that, then I'm going to ride with the whites and their offspring. It doesn't matter how conscious or intelligent they claim to be, they are showing themselves to be slaves to the whites and their offspring, slaves to the enemy. It's like a girl who's being prostituted and she meets some other individuals and they try to support her and teach her different things and show her different things and show her a different way, and she loves everything they're saying. And she sees a new way of life. As soon as they say, but in order to embrace who you really are, you need to leave that pimp alone. He's a criminal. Then she says, well, that's where we depart, because I'm never going to leave him, and if I have to choose between embracing you all and totally cutting myself off from him, well, I'm just going to have to go back to him. The pimp has separated the young woman from her real family because she is endeared in a corrupt and perverse way to the pimp. And this is what these white spirits of disorder have done to the minds of our people. So you will see people calling themselves with Yoruba names from Kemet, Akan names from the Igbo tradition, Dogon, everything else. Talking about culture, writing books, teaching people, talking about healing and everything else. But when that subject of the whites and their offspring comes up, that's when they lose their minds and draw the line. And if you step beyond that line, they will separate from the rest of the black population because they've been endeared to the spirits of disorder, the criminal spirits of disorder. This is how they separate our people. So when we wake up and recognize the nature of the whites and their offspring and our own nature and how we are irrevocably separated, inextricably tied with regard to the way we function, they are spirits of disorder. They are the cancer cells in the body of black humanity. We are the naturally healthy cells. We are not the same. We're not all part of the same family. If you look at your body, you can see that 1 out of every 100,000 cells becomes cancerous at any given time. Yes, they're all in the same body. They used to be normal, but now they are disfigured, and now they function in a disharmonious fashion. Now, some people will come along and say, well, it doesn't matter, we're all the same. Over 99% of our genes and genetic material is the same, so therefore we're all one human family and race is a social construct. Pure foolishness. That comes directly from the minds of the whites and their offspring to control our people. We are clearly different from them physically, and we are clearly different from them spiritually. And the key is the spiritual structure, our spiritual anatomy. They don't have a kra, and they also don't have a ba, that divine living energy that connects individual energy to the energy of the abosome that you are assigned to. They don't have that either. And we did a broadcast on that as well. Just like we did a broadcast on the Kra, the soul divine consciousness, we also did a broadcast on the ba, the divine living energy, the spirit, the bra. So they have neither. So that separates us from them in essence, essentially. And then, of course, physiologically, we are distinct. Morphologically, with regard to phenotype, with regard to melanin content and so forth, we're distinct. So when somebody comes along and says, well, 99+% of our genetic material is the same, and we need to focus on that, no, we need to focus on the less than 1% that's different. That's the most important aspect that we need to focus on consistently. If you develop a malignant tumor within your body, a small tumor, and then there's a biopsy done, and it's recognized to be malignant, 99+% of your body is not malignant. Less than 1% of your body, that small tumor is the thing that's malignant. So if you follow that foolish logic, if the doctor said, well, you have a tumor in you, we found out that it's cancerous, it's malignant. Then you say, well, what are we going to do? And they say, well, actually, that's a small tumor, but in the larger scheme of things, 99+% of the rest of the cells in your body are not malignant. So we're not going to focus on the negatives of the malignant tumor. Let's just focus on the fact that the rest of your body is not malignant. So leave that tumor alone and don't focus on it. And if you say, no, I would like to destroy that malignant tumor and remove it from the body, and they say, well, you're just being immature. Stop focusing on the negative and focus on the fact that there are other cells that are not malignant. Then, of course, you would die. And that's absurd. And you wouldn't go to such a doctor, a physician, who's talking such nonsense, such idiotic philosophy, pseudo-philosophy. The most important thing you need to be focused on is the less than 1/100th of a percentage of your cells that are malignant, so you can destroy them to maintain the integrity of the body. Yes, we have 99+% similar genetic material. That's not what's important. What's important is that percentage, that less than 1%, that distinguishes us, which shows there's a difference between us and them. And once we understand that, we reject them and we preserve ourselves. It is their foolish philosophy that they seek to force upon us so that they can control our people and separate our people through a perverse endearment for a small percentage of our people to ally with them. And for those individuals who think that's not happening, you prove it every single day. Because as soon as somebody talks about hatred or rejection, divine hatred of the whites and their offspring, you choose the spirits of disorder, proving and betraying the fact that you are controlled by them. They are not your family members. They are not your ancestresses and ancestors. They are invaders, interlopers, pollution into the blood circle that need to be and can be easily expelled forever. So let's look at some of these comments real quick. One question about, depending on what divinity rules your head, certain items will work better than others to invoke. For example, Afi in the sistrum, musical instrument or music playing containing the sistrum. Yes, there's the different forces in nature, and this is when we get into real ritual. Just like there's sunlight shining through rain or mist is refracted or bent and breaks up into the different colors of the rainbow. The different colors are different rates of vibration, different frequencies, and so forth. In the same fashion, you have some fiery divinities that generate a certain kind of fiery, powerful energy, fast energy. You have cooler divinities that manifest a different vibrational output. When you have certain instruments or colors, that resonate at the same frequency of those divinities, and you utilize them, then you align your spirit with theirs through the agency of that instrument, and you can attune to them easier. No different than, tuning up an instrument, using one instrument to tune up another instrument so you can get on the same frequency. It's the same concept. So the different colors are associated with different divinities based on the way the spirit moves through creation. Because one spirit moves very fast through creation and generates in space, as that spirit is moving through space, generates a red, glowing, pulsating energy. Because they generate that kind of energy, that's the sacred color of the abosom. It's not that we just like, hey, I like red, I'm going to make this the color of this deity. Because the way that fiery force moves through creation, it generates a red energy in creation. The way another force in creation moves, it generates a bluish energy in creation. That is this sacred color. So when you utilize that same color ritually, you begin to resonate at the frequency. You become in harmony with that divinity. The same thing with certain musical notes, the same thing with certain smells and so forth, same thing with certain herbs, gems, stones, and so forth. Everything in creation that's natural resonates at the frequency of one or more of the abosom, and you can utilize these things as magnifiers of the energy of this abosom. Remember, we talked about shrines being magnifiers of the energy of abosom. So if you have, as we said, sunlight shining on some dry leaves that fell on the ground, the leaves are just warm. If you take a magnifying glass and put it in between the sunlight and the leaves, that same sunlight that's been shining on the leaves, all of a sudden moving through that glass becomes magnified, focused, pointed, and then the leaves up under the magnifying glass burst into flame because the sunlight's energy has simply been magnified and focused. When we set up an enkombre, a shrine, for a certain divinity, their energy becomes magnified through the shrine, and that's why it manifests at the shrine in that powerful fashion. It's a magnet for them to take up residence there, but also a magnet for us because our energy is aligned with that abosom because we were assigned to them pre-incarnation, and therefore we have a more full communication with them and more clear, direct, and fulfilling communication so we can get some direction and so forth. So yes, the different colors, stones, gems, smells, aromas, and so forth from naturally created substances, naturally occurring substances, these different things, once you align them with the force in creation, then you're engaging in real ritual. Okay, so we just want to go through, make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room. Just scrolling through. All right, so take one of the calls real quick, and then we're going to finish up. Okay, Michio, greetings, Michio. You had a question or comment on the phone line?
Yes. One question that comes to my mind is how are people that follow this order and was able to escape, and they went up in the hills of what they call East Asia or Europe, what they call it, and they got entrapped with the Ice Age. Is it normally the ice, which we call coal, is a natural element? Does that have anything to do with anything in regards to this order? That's my question.
Now, right before that, you said, did what have to do with disorder?
No, like say most of them that follow criminal or disordered conduct, just like like you said, a cancer, and then it starts to infest into the body. So at times the natural cells come in and destroy it. So like some escape, the destruction, escape, killing of themselves getting destroyed, and they come up to this upper part, and they slip into the Ice Age, and within incest and etc. became hell, what we label white now. So I'm saying one thing that I find questionable is does the elements, especially the cold, does that also relate to anything about being with disorderly?
Okay, so you're talking about the elements themselves. Now, with regard to the cold, the winter, and ice age and everything, that has to do a lot with morphology as well as the loss of pigmentation to a certain extent. The ice and cold in and of itself is not a disorder. It's not a manifestation of disorder. That's a natural part of the earth. But, of course, it's not natural for us to live in that environment. So if we, just like there are certain foods that are natural for us to eat, but if we go and try to eat other things, like something that can be poisonous, like a mushroom or something like that that's naturally occurring but it's poisonous, if we go ahead and eat it anyway, then we die from it. If we go move to a region that's not in harmony with us, then we die from it. If you take an animal that's warm-blooded and put it on a plane and just drop it off in the snow, then it dies very soon because that's unnatural. So we're naturally drawn to the regions of the Earth Mother that we should be occupying. And this is the key with regard to those migrations. Many of our people migrated up into southern Europe thousands of years ago. We've done that. So it wasn't that landmass, that region of the Earth Mother in and of itself that was the problem. If you're on the continent, we're in different parts of the continent. People engage in criminality, then those people get attacked. They get killed, just like today. Somebody engages in rape or murder, incest, molestation, dissexuality, whatever it is, they would get eliminated. If they escape and went further north into Afuraitkai, they may be living there for a while. They may be living there for a few hundred years, isolated, but their children and grandchildren wouldn't engage in the same kind of behavior they did that got them kicked out of the village in the first place, very often. But in any event, at some point, some of the other populations were migrating north as well, and they would come in contact with these individuals who have been separated for a long time. They may interface with them. They may integrate with them. If they still intergenerationally were engaged in disorder, then they will be eliminated. So even if they had went up into northern Afuraitkai, at some point there was going to be some interfacing with some other groups. And if they were still on that disordered nonsense, they will be eliminated. The same thing happens when we move up into southern Europe. We're living in the southern part of Europe. Some of our people living, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in southern Europe and so forth, some of our people engage in that perverse behavior. They typically would be destroyed. Just like cancer cells developing in the body, they get destroyed. Some of them would escape that and move further north into Europe. The only difference here is, on the continent, if somebody was in central Afuraitkai and they escaped further north and then engaged the same process and escaped further north and kept doing that over hundreds of years, at some point they're going to end up leaving the continent. But at some point they're going to be overtaken by the other groups that migrate into their regions and come in contact with them. When that started happening in southern Europe, some of the people moving further north, the people who are living a natural lifestyle, they weren't moving further north. They weren't going to go up further north for any reason. So these people were drawn up into northern Eurasia, into a region where normally we would not be living because they're disordered and they can't live in harmony with the Earth Mother. They got caught up in the Ice Age. But even before the Ice Age, they moved up into the region because they're moving into places where they really shouldn't be, which is not natural, but they're operating in disorder anyway. Plus, they're trying to escape from the larger society. But in this case, we're not going to keep moving further north. You can keep moving further north on the continent, but once you're in southern Europe, there's a point beyond which you're going to try to move and live. So they got caught up in northern Eurasia during the last Ice Age, and of course, some of them got kicked out because of, or escaped because of incest. So they continued that process, which they were doing anyway, which got their cry repelled from them in the first place. And practice of incest greatly increases the incidence of albinism. That's just a fact with animals as well as human beings. But engaging in that kind of behavior also increases the incidence of autoimmune diseases like vitiligo, which strips your melanin from your body in your lifetime. It doesn't take thousands of years. That can happen within 10 years. And somebody's chocolate brown and they get stripped. And you can Google people with vitiligo and see a black person and their progression from having one white spot to their entire body is stripped of abatum, and they used to be chocolate brown, and now they're totally white. That's an autoimmune disease. and they don't, quote-unquote, have a cure for that. But, you know, engaging in incest and other kinds of criminal activity will increase those kinds of, you know, having children like that will increase the incidence of having these genetic mutations. And that kind of, you know, so that shows up with regard to moving into the ice. That affects the phenotype. When people are eating foods, the kind of wild game in nature that, you know, exists in those areas, living in those areas, the lack of sunlight and all that, that affects the bone structure of the individuals. Their bones become weaker, more rickets and so forth. When they look in the archaeological record, they see the people living up in those northern climes developing these bone diseases at a much higher incidence rate and so forth. So the lack of nutrition, lack of sunlight, that causes, you know, a negative effect on the morphology of the bone structure of the individual. And also with regard to being able to, you know, synthesize abatum, melanin, all that kind of stuff, the pineal gland not functioning properly, becoming calcified at a higher level than normal at earlier ages and so forth. All those different things come into play, and that causes, you know, the way they manifest physiologically. But the key is, spiritually, the repulsion of the cry. When you engage in disorder, you repel your cry. And when you persist in disorder, engage in all kinds of criminality, your cry will leave. It's a divinity. It's a force in nature. It will not dwell in disorder. You can't make your cry dwell in disorder. If you engage in that and persist in that, your cry will simply leave. It's like if you were in a certain place and somebody started acting a fool, you get up and leave. You don't have to sit there. You don't have to dwell in the same spot. You'll leave. A spirit of order is not going to be forced to dwell within the spiritual vehicle of an individual. They've been assigned by the Supreme Being to guide them, but if the individual is repulsive, makes themselves repulsive, then the spirit, the cry will separate from the spirit and leave, and eventually return to Inyame wa Inyame, and now you have a spiritual, you have a dilemma where the individual is a spirit without a cry, like a body without a brain. They're a spirit of disorder, and therefore they will operate in a disordered fashion. They will migrate in disordered patterns. They will copulate in disordered patterns. They will engage in all kinds of disordered behavior, and of course that will lead to them moving to places, engaging in behavior, dietary patterns, and everything else that will cause that autoimmune disease to manifest and other, you know, genetic mutations to manifest, and then they become the whites in their offspring. But it's rooted in their behavior and their disalignment from divine order. That's the root.
Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, and another thing, with the vulture on the cover of tonight's show, did you already talk about what is the importance of the vulture? I see a picture.
Well, it's an animal totem. Well, for example, in ancient Kemet, one of the terms for the vulture is Mut, which means, Mut also means mother. You'll see the vulture on the head of the queen mother. It's a great mothering divinity, a protectress of royal sovereignty. So you'll see on the forehead, even of the king and the queen, the vulture and the cobra, which is Nekabet, the vulture, and Wachet, the cobra governing northern and southern Kemet, Nekabet, southern Kemet, Wachet, northern Kemet, also governing electromagnetic energy moving through the system and so forth, the magnetosphere of the planet Earth. Nekabet and Wachet are called Abba and Yad in Akan culture, and Oba and Oya in Yoruba, and they're called Ayaba and Ebejida in Vodun. So they govern the magnetosphere of Earth, the magnetosphere in your body. But that mothering principle, she's a divine protectress, nourisher, but a divine protectress of royal sovereignty, and has to do with the ancestresses and ancestors as well. Not just the royal ancestresses and ancestors, but the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors as well. So this is why you'll see the vulture as a headdress for queen mothers all over ancient Kemet, as well as in Hanat, in Nubia. But then you also see the vulture as animal totems all across the continent as well.
Okay. Thanks for answering my question, Medase.
Okay, Medase, we appreciate the call. All right, so we looks like that was the only call we had. So we'll end there. So we just wanted to go through that information. We want to show how the whites and their offspring use Bebra, use reincarnation as a means by which to criminally endear certain Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut to them, to use those individuals against the rest of the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit population. They do that in the physical world. They try to endear themselves to some of our people, so that will create a split between our people, and now some of our people will defend them, and as soon as you begin to defend them, now you've separated from the rest of the black population. They did that on the plantations, when they produced mulattoes who will later become, head of the plantations. Some of the black people would think that this mulatto is going to be on their side, and in reality they're not. The mulatto will make some of the black people believe that all you have to do is obey the master, and therefore you will get a higher position on the plantation. And those in the field are only in the field because they are disobedient. They're not good, and if they were good, they would be treated better and so forth. And in reality, none of that is true. The reason they're on the plantation is because the white plantation owner is alive. Once you kill the white plantation owner, there is no longer us on the plantation. So the only thing we should have been focused on is killing the whites and their offspring on the plantation, burning that plantation down, and taking that criminal mulatto who's working on behalf of their white parent, taking them out as well. That's the only thing that would solve the problems on the plantation, is to massacre the owners of the plantation. They do the same thing today. They would, in the physical world, they try to endear our people, and through that perverse endearment, they separate us. But even through miscegenation, even through incarnation and reincarnation, these corrupt spirits of disorder seek to whisper into the ears of some of our people who are receptive but not paying attention, especially those who have the whites and offspring who have polluted the blood circles. They make them believe that they're part of their family and therefore they must embrace them. They are not part of your family. They have nothing to do with you. They are criminal interlopers, invaders. You repel them so that you can live in harmony with the actual ancestresses and ancestors that were assigned to you from your real family by the Supreme Being, and you align with the abosom that were assigned to you by the Supreme Being pre-incarnation. When we engage that process, we reject the criminality, reject these spirits of disorder, reject these cancerous cells within the great black body of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit humanity, and then we move forward. So we need to understand what identity is, where our alliances truly lie, who to accept and who to reject. We accept Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people and Afuraitkaitnit people only, those who live in harmony with order. We reject all of the whites and their offspring who exist, all of them who have ever existed, and all of them who ever will exist without exception until we make them extinct. And those individuals in our own community who seek to operate on behalf of the whites and their offspring against the rest of the population, they are the enemies as well. They are agents of the whites and their offspring, and they're no different than those cancerous cells, and we reject them as well. So, for those who came in a little bit later, didn't see some of the links, you can go to our Nhoma page on ODWIRA.com, ODWIRA, F as in free, O.com. All of our 16 books, including the Madanechi, Divine Law and Divine Hate, that we were reading from tonight. You can download that book for free. We also have the softcover version. You can download all 16 of our books for free, as well as the softcover versions. You can order those. We do print our own books in color on our own printers in-house. Our books range between $8 and $11. We have a number of different topics that we address on Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion, culture, and nation building. So, for example, we have Afuraitkaitnut, the origin of the term Africa. We show in the Medusa, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet, the actual term Afurakai, showing that it has to do with the creation of the first landmass of Earth by the Creator and Creatress. We're the first to show that, prove that this term comes from our languages and has nothing to do with the whites and their offspring. We have Ankh, the origin of the term yoga. Kara, Kasa, the origin and nature of the chakra. We show that the term Ankh, Onka, is where they get Yonka in Proto-Indo-European languages from, but they don't understand where it comes from. They stole this term. We showed in the Medusa, the hieroglyphs in ancient Kemet, one of the terms for Onka is the domesticated animal with an Ankh around its neck in the form of a yoke. This is where the whites and their offspring recognize that the term Ankh and Yonk or yoke is the same term, but they didn't know why those sounds meant yoke, so they just said yonk means to yoke, and therefore they started using that term. But we can show cosmologically where that term comes from. It's iconography in ancient Kemet. We show the term kara, meaning a circle or cylinder, and dealing with the forces in nature that dwell within the body. This is where they get kakra from in Sanskrit. They didn't create these terms, and the pseudo-philosophy they associate with these terms, chakra, kakra, and yoga, we show that they are bankrupt, and we show the original culture in Afurakai, from where these terms were birthed and what they actually have to do with our spiritual practice. And once you study that, you'll find that it's totally different from what the whites and their offspring are talking about. We also have more means dead. Our book, More Means Dead, proving that term etymologically and cosmologically means dead. We break that information down in detail, which until we release that information, no one had the proper definitions of what the term more means and where it actually comes from. So we show that again in the language of ancient Kemet and how those various definitions manifested cosmologically, how they were birthed, where do these terms come from, where do they fit in our cosmology, and what do they have to do with death? So we go into detail about that. We have a number of different books on a number of different subjects, so you can download all of them for free. The ebook versions and the softcover versions, again, $8 to $11 is the price range. If you order 10 books or more, you automatically receive 30% off. Some people will order, for example, the first 10 books, and instead of paying $96 for 10, you pay $66 for the first 10 books. If you order 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, any order of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. So many people just order the entire 16-book set for $105. That's 16 books. That's less than, of course, $10 a book. So that's that. We also are in the midst of our calm economic development model operation, where we're supporting one business per week for the next 52 weeks. Go to our ACOM page on our ODWIRA website. We have the ACOM economic development model, where we starve the beast, reallocate funds away from white businesses, and reallocate them to Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions. So we will be back on tomorrow for Egua Marketplace, talking about that some more. You can go to the webpage, download the economic development model, ACOM, the publication for free, of course. Download the 2 videos where we examine that document. And on that page as well, the ACOM page, OKOM page, ACOM page, you'll see the list of businesses. We targeted Inkingu Health last week and asked everyone to support that business. Dr. Asivi Adiro, the doctor of naturopathy, she serves our community in a great capacity, healing our people, curing our people, teaching our people, and so forth. So we ask people to support that business, to starve the beast, take those funds and reallocate them to that business last week. This week is the business is our Kongwa Suya Dime, which is our institution of learning, healing, training, employment, and entrepreneurship. So you'll see that business listed as the second business. Then next week is another business for the third week. So so far we have 14 listed, and we're going to have all 52. So keep checking the website. Every week, we're starving the beast and reallocating those funds to support a black business so they can expand employ our people, expand their services to our community. Let's stop wasting our funds with the whites and our offspring and reallocate them to serve our own interests. So, Yerase, we thank you for tuning in. We will be back on tomorrow. Follow us on Blog Talk. Follow us on Facebook at Afuraitkaitnut. Follow us on YouTube at ODWIRA and Twitter as ODWIRA on Twitter and Afuraka on Instagram. And then we also, when you go to our website, you will see that we have the Afuraitkaitnut.ning.com, our own private social media network where people are studying the same kind of information to network. You can join that network, create a profile. We post discussions, blogs, videos, all kinds of information, and people network who are studying the same information. So, Yerase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebeshi Abio, we will meet again. That's it.